Night for Wednesday, September 26th. First item of business is a review of this evening's agenda. Is there any concerns about tonight's agenda that we need to discuss? I do actually have one. For the reports, Darrell Robinson, our school board representative, says he might be a little late, so we may need to push that particular report 4.2 back a little, just to give him a little more time to get here. We'll see if he's here or not at the time, but he says he will be on his way. He's just got parent-teacher conferences for his kids. So
we also want to continue 6-point plans.
We're going to continue it?
Yes.
Does the council have any issue with that? Nope. Okay. Any other agenda items? Okay.
I know Jared sent an email today about just wanted to make sure that I told them that like those were just want to make sure they were noted.
Alright. Well, we will
Sure we can. So Jared's email was we talked about this a little bit previously, the trail approval process, and I think we're kind of all on the same page on that. And I think the main concern there is just when it's in close proximity to residential areas. I mean, if it's just in the open space, I don't think there's near the concerns or question there, but I think it's when it starts to come in close proximity to any residential areas that there needs to be probably at least discussions on what those proposed alignments are to make sure that we're looking at that from all angles and trying to mitigate any potential concerns that we have.
Do you have an idea on what you think is close proximity? Because that would be a guideline we could actually go on.
Right.
Well, why can't we treat it much like we do any other development with the community facilitators?
300 feet.
Yeah, it's just affected residents. I think feeding it into the exact same process makes perfect sense.
Yeah.
Okay. That whole process and plan is going to come back to you probably in the next work meeting.
fantastic.
We couldn't put it all together in time for this one,
No,
so
absolutely.
we'll hit it on the next one.
And then Jared wanted also to mention in there talking about minimum setbacks in some of our zones and just making sure that we're looking at those. We'll see there's some obviously that are depending on the type of development that's in there. There's some very small setbacks in there. I think he has some concern over that.
That might have come from some of your contact by a resident. Seeing short picture of in town homes and they're not a big side yard setbacks.
I haven't seen that in the I am familiar with what you're talking about. And then the last thing he had on there was just talking about master development agreements and really how they're structured. Do they really benefit the city? Are they, I think, necessary? What are some alternatives to that? So I think he's got some good points there. I think a lot of times there's a lot of things that are negotiated in those up front, for large development parcels that as the city evolves and changes a little bit, I think there's things in there that all of a sudden our hands are tied on, and that may not always be best case and where we're at that particular time for development. And I think that there's a lot of people that would agree with that. So
yeah. And then conversely, though, the conversation about the benefits of such agreements
absolutely
as well. So
yeah.
I think that the residents would appreciate sort of a neutral discussion on both sides of that issue.
Agreed.
So repeat which one. We have on the future potential.
Minimum setbacks.
No, I got that.
Parks and trails, minimum setbacks,
Got that.
NDAs.
Master development agreements.
Okay. Any other items for future agenda?
You said low density agricultural zone too.
Oh, I thank you. I did forget. I
That
forgot that one.
was something else.
Thank you. I missed that one.
The low density agricultural zone.
That's what I would call it.
Back again?
Again, still, whatever you want to call it.
I want people to run.
on to item 3.1, Majestic View Lane Maintenance Agreement discussion. Blake.
Okay. Got a presentation here for you. All 3 slides of it, and one of them is just a picture. All day long, Alan.
Short and pictures, all right.
Okay. So Majestic View Lane is located south of Rose Canyon Road. It's part of the Cove at Herriman Springs project. It was approved back in 2006. And it came in with one approval for these lots and all the lots south of it. I think it was 296 lots were approved. And so these lots are kind of unique. You can see that the yellow line that runs along here is the city boundary. So the lots reside in Herriman, the lots that will be created when they record the plat. But the road that services them resides in the county. So we just kind of want to have a discussion on that.
Sorry,
Where exactly
the
is
lots
this?
that will be recorded with the plats, show me where the lots will
The
be.
lots are right in this
Just
area.
those ones,
It's like
okay.
5 lots, 6 lots right here.
Okay, thank
4
you.
lots. And so yeah, Rose Canyon Road's right up on the, just off the map. This is Spring Canyon, White Hollow right there. So the address, I can't see that far, 14600 south, about 7100
So the
west.
lots that we're talking about are at the bottom portion,
They're these lots right
Okay.
here, yeah. And so they front onto Majestic View,
which at that point is in the county.
is in the county. So when this was approved, the developer got a letter from the county, because you can see the road that runs here is Majestic Oaks Lane. It's
Who's the developer? Hello. How are you?
Travis Taylor, the right time. Sorry, I should have just pointed.
Hi, Travis, nice to meet you.
Is Majestic gravel or paved?
It's unpaved in the county, 5-acre lots. And so, as you'd imagine, when this came in, those residents were concerned about the traffic, so they went to the county. The county said, okay, you won't have permanent access onto this lane, but you'll have emergency access. That has to be gated. So that was a requirement. They're okay to do that. The lane was actually all dedicated to the county in 1987 by plat. So it's all public property right now, so it's not a private road or anything like that. Talking Majestic View Lane right now. Both of them are public, but this one's a public dedicated road, just not paved, residing in the county. So where we're at now is they want to move forward with this development. They want to pave that road, but there's no one to maintain this road. The county would have to come all through the city streets to maintain it. The city makes sense to maintain it, but it's in the county. So there's a couple of options. We talked with John a while ago, and there was a discussion about an interlocal agreement to maintain a road outside of the city, or do we annex this property, the roadway, into the city so that we can maintain it?
Cleaner to annex it, isn't
Yeah.
it?
So
So does it
Okay.
extend from the right-hand side into it, or do they have to come down Majestic?
it comes from this
Okay.
this direction, and that'll be where the gate is located right there.
Okay.
And
You keep them off the other one?
Mhm. So,
Sorry.
yeah, the question is, if we wanted to keep them moving, we could maybe look at a interlocal agreement that has a sunset clause.
As
It has
we're
to
trying
annex-
to annex it,
It has
so
to
that
annex
we're
by a
not
certain date.
slowing them down.
Mhm.
Who would sign the annexation? Is it the county, because they're the
who
property
owns
owner?
That's a good question. I don't know how to go forward with that one. John, do you have any recommendation on if that was a county piece of property to annex it in, who signs that?
Is platted and dedicated to the county?
Yeah.
Once a property's annexed, any public road automatically becomes a city road, so you don't have to dedicate it at that point. It just,
I'm saying,
Transfer
where
stuff.
is it currently now?
it's in the county.
Yeah, I don't know the answer who the petitioner is.
Or the other option is the county pays us to maintain it?
I haven't
doesn't
approached the
pay
county
us.
to ask that. I think it's just an
Just an
agreement,
interlocal
do it,
that says we'll do it.
They should have to pay us to do it, if it's not our property, shouldn't they?
and we could ask that. I don't,
Well, I think their response is no.
yeah, but I can tell you what.
Probably just
John
get
will
a
tell
no
you the
from
answer is.
that, but it's, so we can always ask.
So I'm just coming to ask how we can keep the developer moving along, because we did approve this, the city approved these lots.
Well, given the lots are in the city, it makes no sense to me that the road that would give them access to the property is outside. I think the cleanest approach is the best approach, so whatever it means for me, whether that be a temporary, interlocal, but with the goal of bringing it in, it doesn't make any sense for them to be separate, to me.
Okay.
That's my two cents.
With a reasonable sunset clause, it needs to be pretty quick.
We're thinking, maybe like, it's either January or July, so it'd be like January 2020, which would give it about a year, because we can't hit the July one. Or we could hit the July one, we can't this January, but that gives us enough time to make it work, so.
Yeah, I agree. I think it doesn't make any sense for us to try to even go to the county, especially with the climate between the county and cities right now. We don't wanna go messing with that. And I think just annexing into the city is cleaner, then it's city property, then we maintain it, we can, there's just no question. And I don't have any problem doing a temporary agreement with the understanding that that's the deal, and there is a sunset clause on it, because we're not gonna, we've seen things drag out for years and years and years, and, it's a simple fix.
So I have a question. Would that person annex?
Which one?
Here's my point right there.
There's several people up there who have talked to us about annexing.
But, no, well,
But
that property.
I don't know.
Specific property owner.
I don't remember who that was.
So they have asked to annex several of those properties, but we don't wanna annex them without the whole thing. It's a very controversial, it would be nightmarish to, those people would battle, it would be a horrible
I didn't
experience.
say, what about the one property?
We would not want that to happen.
You don't want one property?
No.
So if you cannot annex in county property, what do we do?
Well, I don't believe we wanna annex those guys. I think that would be a nightmare for us.
You're saying
preference would-
ever.
Well, not ever, but we want the whole
We
thing,
need the
'cause
whole
they're
thing.
battling each other.
So how do we make sure that we don't end up with 5 residents or 2 residents or however many it is that don't have a road?
So the developers agreed to build this
You gotta
road up
build
here
So we're.
to city
Just
standards.
Right.
So it's the same scenario as any other development where developer putting in the road, we're just maintaining, so it's.
What road is
Is
mine?
there a reason the county couldn't
What's that?
dedicate something to us, or annex it to our
kind of
city?
road?
Oh, it's a city standard.
It's a city standard.
You're saying a dedication versus an annexation, Gordon?
Well,
He's just one.
I agree with you, I agree with the council's consensus, I think it's better just to annex into the city, that just makes all the sense in the world.
We just don't know if that's possible.
If the county can.
It seems like,
Between two cities.
That's right.
if they abandon the property to the developer, and then the developer annex it in, that could happen.
That could happen.
So there might be a way to skin the cat. We don't skin cats
Are
anymore.
they gonna want some financial, something?
I have a
We're not
cat.
skinning anything, but
So
would the
given all
county
this,
then want some
We'll
reimbursement
think
for
of a way
the
to do it, I
dedication?
don't know the answer.
I hear the council directing us to let's go ahead and annex it,
Right.
but let's find the mechanism to get
Figure out a
through
way
it.
to
And then we just.
I think that's the
We have
cleanest
to
way,
tell them
absolutely.
that the payment is, we're gonna maintain the road.
I'm sure I'll get to carry some. Yeah. Well, that's what they have to do.
I don't want to annex it.
I get that loud and clear.
So maybe before we put the time in the agreement of maintenance, that we kind of see what this process is gonna be, because if we give us too short of a time frame, we don't wanna cause an issue there.
Yeah, definitely need to have
And
all the
there's
answers, but I
personality
think that's definitely the best direction.
So, question, if we own it, would we be willing to maintain it even if it's not in the city? Well, I guess
Can we?
If we own it, we just
we
annex
own
it.
Yeah, we annex it. As I was saying, what am I saying? Stop, I can't.
Well, maybe they
I'm
could,
gonna go with no, John.
if they could deed it to us and then we sign
That's
the
what I'm thinking, is have them convey it to.
That might be an easier plan, is just have them deed it to us and then we control our own annexation of that.
You want me to work
with you on that, John, or?
Yeah, I know what the county's gonna say is, well, it's valuable.
Yeah.
So you guys know what our direction is, right?
Yeah, we got it.
Fantastic.
We may come back and give you some more.
So, at this point, we're gonna go ahead and move on to item 3.2, discussion relating to the auto mall zone. Michael.
Okay, so we just wanted to give you a quick update. We published this report prior to the Planning Commission's public hearing and vote on this matter. The Commission did recommend approval of the draft. Our next step is to have John Brems review it prior to your review. But of course, you did see the draft in your packet. Another related amendment that will be coming in, I think a C2 zoning amendment, is that we want to concentrate automobile sales in this particular district. So we're actually going to be removing the ability to do auto sales from the C2 zone. So again, we've been trying to work with potential business interests in the automobile zone. So we've responded to them, but we fully anticipate, this is kind of like our good faith effort to show that we're serious about doing this in the city. We fully anticipate as we get closer to actually doing a project, we may get further requests from developers to make some adjustments to this zone, but at least it gets it in place. This is just the creation of the text amendment only. We still will have to go through a separate process to actually change the zone itself. But as you know, we're in the process of doing, making certain decisions in that part of the city, so we're not able to change that zoning right now. But this just creates the text for it. If council has any questions or concerns about the draft, we can certainly prepare options when we bring it back before you.
I was gonna just mention, I saw, Nicole was puzzled, so I'm just gonna answer. Perplexing.
No, I know. I was just wishful, okay, perhaps it was a little perplexing. My thought, and I was going to edit myself, but since you brought it up, I was really trying to edit myself more, way to go. No, I was hopeful, perhaps is a better word than perplexed, that we were close-ish to, the phrase that perplexed me was you said, as we get closer. My hope was, I thought we had at least two very legitimate efforts in this regard.
Let me restate what he said. As soon as you get this thing done, we're gonna be rezoning property.
So, all right. So I'm supportive.
The second piece is, I want just to reiterate why we're taking out the C2, is we've seen places, I've seen, in other communities like State Street, where all of a sudden a gas station shuts down and it's used cars and new cars show up. So I'm taking it out of every zone except where we control it. And so that can't happen
for a dedicated
anywhere else, unless you come back and ask for a zone to put it there.
That I think is a very good idea.
So
we control our destiny that way.
We are moving very quickly, and we'll be having some discussion about that tonight.
Here's what I think is happening. The conversations at a much higher level, we thought we would get more specific feedback from the development team. We received some, but we think once they take that next step, they're going to want more. They're going to want more refinement to the draft.
And my direction is just always one of haste, because there's no prize for second place when this comes, and so that was my concern. Was I don't want to feel like we're still way down the road. I would like to feel like we're much closer to the brass ring, so to speak. Right. So that's my thoughts.
But we've responded to everything they've asked us to do so far in this proposal.
Are they having similar conversations in other municipalities?
We will talk about it in a few minutes. Well, maybe in an hour or so.
All right.
Okay, for a couple hours.
Oh, great.
I don't know.
To look forward to, Gordon. Thanks.
Hopefully we get done this the first hour. Moving right along.
Well,
So speaking of moving right along,
sorry.
Being quiet.
Item 3.3, Herriman Crossroad Development Agreement Update. Michael.
Okay. About 8 days ago, we provided a revised draft to the development team, and we included that revision in your packet. As you can see, it's full of underlines and strike-throughs. We shared that with Ken and Gary and asked them, are they comfortable with all those changes? What was interesting about this process is we've been told that they paid $12,000 for an attorney to review the draft that we initially started with. I did a quick, anybody familiar with Grammarly by chance? It's a great software editing program. It had over 450 serious errors in that initial draft. So we have been doing a lot of cleanup if they really paid $12,000, I think, yeah, that was not money well spent. But they came back, we met with them, we went out on site, and I received an email yesterday, the day before, saying that they liked the changes we proposed. Now, a lot of it was just cleanup. Some of it was just they had duplicated information, we consolidated information. So they basically are saying, how do we take the next step?
And you didn't include an invoice for $12,000.
No. So our next step is we're going to deliver again to our city attorney a clean draft of what you've seen in the packet tonight. And as you know, this still has, you still have an opportunity to make any further changes to that draft. Now, the mayor came and talked with me a little bit today, thinking that there's maybe, we want to make sure the council understands that you know we have a current development application on this property for 254 apartment units, but that's only for a portion of the total property. So Bryn did a quick analysis of what they could do on this property under the current zoning. So that's 1,418 units over these 3 different types of zones. And you can see this is the site plan of the proposal that we've held at their request, at their agreement, that we hold this request until we negotiate this development agreement and see if we can come to a mutual decision. So that's the number of units in that current proposal. So this is basically in that center of all of the property that they own. And yeah, right there. You can see it highlighted. So it's only, do you recall how many?
12 acres.
12 acres of that whole site. And then this is what's in the current draft that we've been working with. So it's 1,000 units.
Within that same little area.
Within the whole area.
So what's the,
So it's a reduction.
14 down to.
what's the, that's what I want, what's the differential, that's what I want.
1,418 units down to 1,000.
So a total difference of 416 units.
Now it's just draft,
So,
but they're
I
giving
think-
us a thumbs up.
Yeah,
on
and
it.
I think it's important to note publicly, their willingness to work with the city on the reduction of density. Because they have been willing to at least continue to hold that where they could move forward. So I mean, I wanna publicly state that we appreciate their willingness to work with the city for a plan that we think will be better and that they're at least willing to keep an open mind to.
Yeah, and they actually said that in their email to me, saying, we think that the revisions we're proposing makes for a better product. So they're starting to recognize that as well. So with your support, we'll take the next step and have John review a clean draft of what you've been
And
given.
pass along our appreciation publicly, that they know that we do appreciate their willingness to work with us.
I will. Okay.
Thank you, Michael, appreciate that. We move on to 3.4, discussion of informal inquiry regarding garbage services. Justin.
Okay, thanks, Mayor and Council. So this was a topic that was brought up probably 6 weeks ago in a council meeting. Sherry wanted to kind of go through a little bit of a study or review of services from other providers, just to make sure we're in line, to make sure we're giving our residents the best service for the dollars they're spending. So first I'd like to recognize Pam Roberts, Executive Director, Wasatch Front there. Her and her team have been excellent to work with, by the way. You know, asking for this information isn't always easy when you have a good partner saying, hey, we're gonna go and shop you a little bit, but they've been great, understanding, very willing to do so.
Pam's not afraid.
and very responsive, so. So moving on, so the objective was basically to determine if the service our residents are currently getting from Wasatch Front are comparable to other solid waste recycling providers throughout the valley. So basically, we went out for basically just a request for information. This wasn't a formal RFP, RFQ or anything like that. So basically, initially what I did is I reached out to Pam, like I said, and asked her to give us a list of all the services that they provide us, because obviously I won't be able to determine all of them because there's a lot. And then a cost to go associated with those. So basically, we can compare apples to apples when we go and request this information. So I sent an RFI out to the other two large solid waste and recycling providers in the county. Sent them the information that Pam sent me. I redacted all the costs so that they weren't having anything to go off of, and then asked them to respond based on that. So then I received the information and compiled it. And as we get into this, there's a lot of information. But, so this is just basically who the providers are that we received the information from, and then basically the cities or areas that they represent within Salt Lake County. As you can see, Wasatch Front represents a lot. ACE, Disposal and Recycling, has, it looks like 5 or so, and then Waste Management, there's 3. And so that's basically all the cities that are in, within the Salt Lake Valley there. So this is a lot of information, and we'll kind of breeze through it a little bit. I sent some of the information in the packet, so if you want, you can go back and we can discuss it later. But basically, I took all the services that Wasatch Front provides and kind of leaned them up here, and then basically was a yes or no, and kind of had to compare them. So obviously, weekly curbside collection of garbage and recycling, they all do. I apologize. Waste Management, that one right there. ACE actually does recycling weekly. Anyway, so yeah, I should have put those. Anyway, so obviously they all provide that. ACE is the only one that does bi-weekly collection of recycling. Annual cleanup, that's where they bring the dumpsters out throughout the year to do area cleanup. Our residents love that. They all basically do it. Some of them, they have different programs, but they come at additional cost. The container repair and replacement, yes, they all do it. As you can see, some of them have contracts you have to have for a certain period of time to include that. Glass collection, they all do it. They have additional costs on some. Landfill vouchers become very popular with our residents the last 2 years, really. And so they provide that as well, additional costs from the other 2 providers. Community partner, what that means is how they incorporate themselves in community events. And Wasatch Front has been a great partner. Based on some of the research I've done, the others, they both do that as well in their communities. So, and then the special cleanups or emergency cleanups, if we have a disaster, things like that, that's essentially what it is. All of them come at additional cost. But they all provide that.
Ours are not an additional cost, or we wouldn't characterize it as such.
In special events and emergency cleanups, I think it would come at additional cost. It's kind of it's event specific, basically. It's depending on how much the cost would be associated with how much cleanup there is.
And the reason I ask is just if we're comparing apples to apples, if the yes on the others that are including an additional cost, is there a base cost that we pay and then we're adding those so they are in fact an additional cost? Or are those elements that others are charging us additionally for are actually part of our package deal, so to speak? Just so it's characterized properly.
Absolutely. So for emergency cleanup, we're gonna help where we're asked to do so. And then of course, if there's FEMA funding later, we have the ability to track that, submit the request to have that reimbursed. For special cleanups, we do have additional charges for like central locations for trailers. If the city wanted us to sponsor some sort of a cleanup, we have a fee based of whatever your needs are. We can do kind of a rating of what it is you want. If it's a weekend cleanup, there might be a little more cost to it. Does that make,
Yeah, but for those like fall leaf bag, Christmas tree box,
Right, that's all included.
where those are.
So we'll get into that on the next slide.
I'm just trying to understand if they're truly, we're, part of our package, or if we're also paying additional, just choosing to do.
Maybe we'll go to the next slide and you'll see that a little bit better. So as you can see, so a lot of the same things are called out on this. This just breaks out the dollars and kind of specific. So to answer your question, Nicole, as you can see on Wasatch Front, a lot of those are included in the monthly fee. And then there's additional costs when you get into, say, the trailer rental program that they have, and those types of things, and they have fixed costs for those. And so if that answers your question. So back to here, so, you know, the fall leaf program, which is going on right now, is very popular as well. They all do it, additional costs. It's included in our contract with Wasatch. Then you see Christmas trees. So they basically provide all the same services. Special assist, what that is if there's a resident that physically can't take their can out to the curb, they'll provide that service at no additional cost. ACE did not include that in their proposal. They all have trailer rental programs, additional containers. Yes, they're all at additional cost if you want more garbage containers or recycled containers. Green waste, as you can see, ACE didn't include that, nor did they include a monthly curbside. It wasn't included in the response. And so I wanted to keep this apples to apples, so I just went with what they responded with. I didn't reach. So moving back to cost, as you can see, the top for the curbside collection, Wasatch Front is $17, ACE disposal is $16.50. Waste management was very hesitant without a formal RFP to give exact costs on what they would be. As you can see, they didn't really give me any information back on what those costs would be. It's just it would be an additional cost for those things. So that one, without a formal RFP, I would see it as we could see the cost climb pretty high with them just being additional costs. So, you know, the area cleanup, ACE Disposal has a program where you add an additional $250 per month on all the bills, and you get a lot of those. The voucher program, the special emergency cleanup, would kind of be included in that $250 cost. But as you can see,
So
So
to compare
it
them
brings it up to
equally,
19.
yeah, we'd be looking at
At
$19
19,
instead
yeah.
of $17.
Yep, and we'll go over that in the next slide as well. But as you can see, some of them are included, and waste management, the price wasn't specified, so I wasn't able to include that on here. So as you can see, they're very comparable costs. The services that we receive from Wasatch Front, a lot of those special cleanup and special features are included in the monthly fee already, and they're not
So
additional
the return on
costs.
investment is very different.
Yes. Yeah. So, you know, there's all the information. So to summarize here, as you can see, Wasatch Front, and so basically what would our residents see really to the cost of them monthly? So Wasatch Front, $17, ACE Disposal is $19, but they only do recycling on bi-weekly. And waste management is $10 to $14 for garbage and recycling curbside pickup, but additional costs are kind of unknown without some of those specified costs. But as you can see, if they're charging us a little more per month for some of those others, it would really climb up and be close to or higher than the other two.
Comparable.
So they're very comparable. I think we're getting great service for the dollars we're spending with Wasatch Front.
That's why she wasn't scared.
Yeah.
She wasn't scared, I knew that, I can tell.
So basically the next step is a little bit of direction from council. If you feel like we're receiving good service for the dollars and we're giving good service to the residents, we'll continue with Wasatch Front. Obviously, no action.
So, yes, I mean, I think it's obvious, you wanna get we're getting all of the services that our residents like for a less price than we could with the competitors. What I would like to do, however, is share that in whatever way we feel appropriate with our residents, so they can see that we continually look at the services, and in fact, with our analysis here, that they are getting more for less. So I don't know that we're comfortable sharing actual costs,
Yeah,
because
I
we
don't
don't have that formality with it, but, you know, wordsmithing accordingly, I do think it's important.
Actually, if you remember right, we actually, they had a pamphlet or one-page thing put out, we put it in our newsletter. It broke down the cost, sort of what services getting. We can get that, just see if there's anything to be updated, get it back out to residents.
Yeah, we'll just include
With the distinction that we have
went
checked
out.
with the, yes, exactly, thank you, Justin,
Yeah.
that's exactly right.
I
And
think,
then-
sorry, Justin, I think that was the whole intent of doing this, was just to make sure, we talked about this at the board meeting the other day, because they were concerned that we were trying to withdraw, and I was like, no, we're just simply making sure for our residents that we are paying.
We're occasionally vetting,
Yeah,
as we should.
it's just important.
Well, we've talked about this, that we need to continually do this with all the services that are
Yeah.
provided to us from outside organizations, is to make sure that we're always looking at what the value is back to our residents, and that they're getting essentially the best deal, you know, what their money's paying for. so.
Well, it's like I said, with this, if you own a home here, you are paying this bill. And even if you don't want to pay the bill, it'll come out of your property tax. You're gonna pay this bill. And so if you have to pay this bill, it's our responsibility to make sure you're getting the value out of, the best bang for your buck. So,
Well, and competition keeps everybody honest,
Yeah.
so. Keep with it, Pam.
Yeah, Pam.
yeah, and it was
We'll be
definitely,
watching.
it was definitely nothing to do with, they've been a great community partner, really. And it was just to do that due diligence.
So I know we've talked about your costs specifically in some of your presentations. What's your, any forecast of your costs changing in
Is
the?
that something we're gonna talk about later?
Yes.
Perfect.
Talk about that,
Okay.
At 7 o'clock, and that will be public, so that'll be good information for everybody to know.
Do you have the direction you need?
I do,
Leave as
yeah,
is?
we'll get the information out to our residents and
Okay.
go from there.
Thanks so much, Justin.
Thank you,
Good
Justin,
job.
we appreciate the
Thanks,
work.
Pam.
Item 3.5, discussion pertaining to Eric's Trail. Wendy.
Pam may not be scared, but I'm scared.
You're never scared either.
You're a tough crowd. So Alan and I have been feverishly trying to get this PowerPoint to work correctly this afternoon.
Is there 3 slides and 1 picture?
No, there's more slides, but there's a video.
Oh,
So,
there's a video now.
bonus.
Wait a
All right. So your first journey with me tonight is Eric's Trail, which
First
is
journey.
our new trail at to our trail system. So you all have these maps in your packet. This map just indicates where the old trail initially was. My understanding, and maybe Gordon can speak to this a little bit, is that this trail was cut by a developer. It had gone onto the dotted line area, was in private property. And when that property switched ownership, the new owner no longer was interested in people trespassing on their property. So the trail was closed, we blocked it off, and we still had this other trail there. So, Gordon, is that a correct
Monty.
recap?
Mostly.
Lower that shade, it's fucking up the table. Thank you.
No, it was great.
That's correct.
I will not be sarcastic.
So, this is the new trail system that, and a lot of this has been cut in the last the Eric's Trail and the same trail, those have been cut in the last 4 months. So, what has happened is, you now have connectivity from the Juniper Crest side all the way to, really to Diamondback, clear over to Black Ridge, or to Butterfield and Black Ridge. So what we've done is just connected trail systems together, which, as I said in the packet, has expanded use on the old trail. Okay, we're gonna jump off and we're gonna show you use on those switchbacks that have brought some concern. Make it happen, Alan. We can do this.
It's just a date.
This is my hood.
It's a big deal.
This is
your hood.
This is my hood.
You missed it last. It was a party.
Oh, you should have, the Trails Committee meeting was a party too.
I bet. They have some opinions about that.
Does it have to,
The amounts of
That was not good.
do that?
Way to go, Alan, this is a great video.
Like,
Look how relaxed he looks. He's unflappable.
Yes, do with me.
It's about the time I start to sweat during a
Yeah.
presentation. I start looking around for the IT help. Start making
It worked
jokes that
earlier.
aren't funny.
It'll
Where I
work.
go with this.
It'll work, Alan's confident. But I think it'll be helpful, it's worth the wait, because I think it will be helpful for you to see the use. So the video will indicate the Herriman High School mountain biking team, there's about 15 kids,
This is off their back
and
porch.
this is from the back porch.
Of the individual that was concerned. about
Yes.
this.
So it's kind of mesmerizing, right?
The sound's turned up, we gotta.
Shoot, want the sound.
You can play the sound if you want, you hear mostly talking.
That's a really nice backyard.
Yeah, I call those BMX turns. Cheater turns.
I'd say that's the worst one. This one's okay.
It's much better done.
But they're not making any sound. But
Oh,
you
yeah,
can still hear the whir from the tires.
A real trail builder makes a world of difference.
Yes, yes, clearly.
Right.
It's about 46 decibels.
When you get people, they'll get in before work.
46.
I don't blame them, but they'll be out here at 5:30. 36.
So to put that in context, a library is about 50, a bird is about 50.
Normal conversation is
Nowhere
60.
else in Herriman do you have a quarter mile of trail.
It's a
So
good
very
reading.
low,
Mm-hmm.
very, yeah.
You had how many people on the mountain?
So there was 15 that Joe counted on this trek.
Did you tell them to be sort of loud and whoop it up, or were they just doing their
No, they're
normal
just
thing?
doing their practice, their normal.
If you watch them, they have to look down the trail. If you're looking into the backyard at that point,
You're gonna die.
You're gonna be in the backyard.
We're putting obstacles in the way, so they
So that's the closest point to the concerned resident's home. It's just under 100 feet from the property line, from his backyard.
This turn right here?
They're gonna be fairly
Yes.
large.
Okay, so
Can you crop them to
that
like
one's the
the
one up
most
in Midway.
congested parts of your video? And then just email them to me.
So
I'm going to take
the mountain
these
bike
to
team,
the
this many kids is up there. It's about an hour a week. But there are multiple mountain biking teams that are up there. So you may see different mountain biking teams on different days of
I'm
the
sure
week.
you're aware that this Wednesday, the Herriman Trails Master Plan is on the agenda.
Uh-huh.
And so it does have a new revised
Yeah,
map.
And according to Joe, who went up there and met with them, you couldn't hear the mountain bikes over their pool filter or over the music from the next door neighbor. So the noise, I'm not so concerned about. As far as mountain biking noise, mountain bikes aren't noisy. That's why people are starting to put bells on them, because people can't hear them coming.
And you're not supposed to have ATVs.
No,
so
there's no
that's not-
motorized. We'll have an occasional.
What?
Horseman wouldn't.
A horseman
It's gonna be
maybe.
less, it's gonna be like
My
65.
breathing and being completely winded.
Yeah,
makes me
exactly.
louder than
We're
anything
screaming
else
as
here,
I'm
yeah.
following down the trail, right? So, okay, Alan. So that gives you an idea of what's happening on that trail behind the home.
And those decibel numbers have been shared with the.
Yes, yeah, she was there showing them while they were speaking.
And how are they feeling now with these?
So I've received an email from him. He did come to the Trails Committee meeting, and he has since deleted several posts on social media that were a little more aggressive. I think he has a better understanding now of the process that they went through and the savings that were incurred by using the old trail system versus cutting new trails. We saved about $9,000 on using the existing system instead of cutting new one. I mean, you can see the estimates there. So I think that it's changed a little bit, but I still think their preference would be for it to go away
And they've
or to
said-
be moved.
Well, and they've said, you mentioned in the packet that they said they were willing to pay for it
He said that in council meeting.
in council meeting. So my opinion here is that I don't necessarily have a problem with option 2 or option 3 if they're gonna put the bill.
Oh, but I do.
I do.
I think that's a bad precedent to
I do
set.
too.
So people that can afford to change the process get different treatment than others. I have.
The reason I say that is because we didn't talk to these guys ahead of time. We're changing our process specifically because of this particular.
And
But
we
it's
should
not
have
in their
to eat
property.
it.
Yeah, but it's not in their.
If it's our error, then we should have to pay for that. But I think it's a really not good
Okay.
precedence to have. Because then you could have a whole neighborhood band together and say, hey, we're gonna write a check to the city and get it how we want. It just seems a little scary. Do you think?
I agree.
Do you see?
Yes.
I see your
my
point, and I
concern.
don't necessarily, I see the setting a precedent. I just wanna also make sure that we're, trying to address issues as reasonably as possible.
Sure.
And, you know, I don't have nearly as much problem with option 2 than, you know, if we were to come in and say, right, well, we screwed up, so let's make some change. I'd have a lot less problem with option 2 than option 3.
But how did we screw up? What are we calling a screw up?
We didn't, you know, so I've been up there, I've looked at it, and it's fairly close. It comes within 100 feet of the property line or so. And we're talking now about, well, we're gonna have a process that anytime we're within 300 feet, we're going to make sure the public has an opportunity to be part of
But
this.
that process wasn't in place when we cut this, so I don't wanna characterize it as a mistake. I'm saying
Okay.
we used the process that we've always used.
Right.
It just is unpleasant to this. So I wanna keep processes the same.
Okay, but in this case then, since we are changing the process specifically because of this case, would we not then want to make sure we address the issue that was caused in this particular case?
But the trail's in at this point.
Well, but the trail case, so what part of it was cut recently? Or did we just reopen something that wasn't?
We reopened something that, well, no, it wasn't even closed, people were still using it. How it became a problem to the resident was that it was now connecting to a larger system.
Yes.
So you have more use.
More use.
I think it sets the precedence if we change we're changing the process for future, but we go back and review anything that's been done. Because we changed the process,
Opens up
take
a
away our
Pandora's
process, we gotta take
box.
everything
I
back
was, that was
under a process.
the point I was just thinking of and wanted to make, is that I
And
think
then
if you, not that I disagree with the way you're approaching that, but I think if you open it up to say, we're gonna change the process and therefore we should go back and look at this and what other ones are gonna come into play there if we do that.
And you're right, I mean, this would be unusual for us, cause as a general rule, we haven't done that in pretty much any situation that we've had where we've gone in and said, now we're gonna change it. You know, and that's the decision that we're making is weighing that, and it's hard for me when we're in a position where we do, at a relatively inexpensive cost, do have the ability to mitigate some concerns, which we've done before, we've mitigated concerns. This is just happening after the fact. Now,
At a cost of $9,000 though.
No, this
Is that what you're
location,
calling
This
it?
location.
for this will open up.
no, for this location. So help me understand one more time. So we had the trail, we keep
Yes.
talking about this,
This was
it was
existing.
an illegal trail, we
No,
did this.
it was not an illegal
Just a
trail.
So then what was this whole,
Just a little
The,
corner.
Where it went
the
onto the other
portion that went
property.
onto this property, when the property transferred ownership, the new owner no longer allowed people on his property.
okay.
But
But we
prior to
had
that,
permission
people
from the
were
previous.
Yes.
Okay, so that's
The
helping me
trail used to
understand.
come up right up, I
Yes.
think, right into
You can see,
here.
you can still see that trail line.
And
Was that the
so,
Foley property?
Yes.
yeah, and so this is where we cut the tail off. This stayed open during the whole time. And then when we got, and
connectivity.
then when additional funding came, the council approved funding, I think Wendy started at this point,
We went the other way. We came from Black Ridge.
and you came down and connected to it.
Yep.
So the trail was there for many years, this close to their home. And we look at, we have trails all through subdivisions that are within
Sure.
10 feet of people's properties where hundreds of kids walk every day to school. So we have complaints about them, and we sympathize.
I guess
And,
we do.
and this is where we have the discussion. I'm not saying that, you know, this is sword to die on for me. This is, I want to make sure that we're always keeping in mind that when even if it's something that we did and we were within our right, that we're always keeping in mind that we want to try to mitigate these concerns when we have the opportunity to.
And that's what I feel like we've done here. I think we've had a discussion with them. I think we've tried to mitigate where we can. But I wanna make that point that it was not a mistake on the part of the city. We are, as Gordon said, sympathizing and trying to mitigate where we can without additional city expense that we have plenty of uses for
And
elsewhere.
that clarification, because I originally heard, and maybe this was misinformation that I received, that this was done by a developer who didn't have the authorization to do it, and so that's where my concern was, is that we just used something that should have never happened in the first place.
And if that were the case, it's a different story to me.
And I think that's where the confusion was for me, so the
The developer
clarification
paid
helps.
for it, but we went up there and helped them stake the trail. So they paid all the costs of that first run.
The comment that the gentleman made in our meeting a couple weeks ago that was concerning to me, and that I would hope that we could somehow mitigate this concern, was he said that 5 o'clock in the morning, it sounds like somebody's in my backyard when they're talking on that trail. So I guess because this is a park, technically a trail kind of thing, I just think it's important that we somehow make sure that we can somehow enforce or post or something that, because our parks are not open that early, you can't plan, but
But some
sidewalks
are.
are.
But some are open.
Well, and certainly we're not going to have any level of enforcement.
Right,
I mean,
that was,
so-
I talked to him too, I'm like, how do we enforce that even? But the problem with enforcement.
How do you keep them from public property at whatever time they
Well,
want?
I know the park behind me when I was on Friendship, it was easy, 10 o'clock at night, if kids are out there at 11 o'clock, I can call and they can come over and say, what are you doing out here at 11 o'clock at night? So help me understand, is there, you know what I'm saying, just, my concern is for mischief, more than anything, you know, utilizing areas like that. How do you deal with that? What is a good approach for that?
I think the same way you would deal if it was on your sidewalk.
We've had scouts up there all night long.
Call
I
if
mean, you
it's bothering you.
If it's gonna be 10:30, we take them all out.
Cause we have noise ordinances in the city, if you're too noisy, then you just call and say, it's disturbing me, right?
So,
Okay.
and I just wanna clarify, cause I can see this coming back to how this is gonna be framed by the homeowner. So you're telling the homeowner that if there's somebody, that we're gonna tell the homeowner that there's somebody on the trail being really loud at 5:30 in the morning, to call the police on them.
I don't know.
What is that gonna?
Whether or not, well, you guys.
That's why I'm asking, cause I don't.
Whether that's a trail that's open all night long, 'cause
Well,
there are areas in Herriman
I
that
think
are
this
open
is,
all night long.
it's just like you said, if somebody's at the park at 11 o'clock or midnight, there's a good chance they should be in bed. No, they shouldn't be there. And it's not that we don't want the police to get them out of there, but it's behooved upon residents to say, hey, something's going on up there. However, there are people that I see walk their dog or do something quietly and
Yeah.
peacefully, that have great etiquette, and I think it would be way
That's
not
my
as good
concern right there.
to go and chase
I don't want
people
that.
out of that. And so if somebody's up here, gets up in the morning, it's
Go
4,
for a
goes for a
jog.
walk, and then
Yeah.
goes to work.
There's nothing
I think this is a
wrong with
trail,
that.
and I think what we
I
would
agree.
say is, if somebody feels something's wrong going on, call chief car. If something's not going wrong,
On his personal phone.
We've had people in the reservoir.
dispatch. Call you, here's his phone number.
No, I know,
Cemetery. Trail. And
Would be very tough
some
to
people
ride
get
in the
bothered
dark.
by that, the garden, goes on all
That would
hours
be
of the night,
scary.
or again, stuff.
I know, I was just perplexed by it all, it's
In the
like, I
dark,
don't know what
yeah.
the right thing to do is, other
Those
than,
aren't
There
very
are just
good.
some things that are gonna be bothering us for a short time. I mean, I have people drive down my road all the time, it's a dead end road, but I have people that drive down my road all the time that either have their radios blaring, or it's a noisy vehicle, whatever it is, that's, you know what I mean, that's certainly not pleasing to me, but
Turning it down.
it's just, it's a public place, you know what I mean?
I do.
I liked Gordon's statement is,
Yeah.
if they're doing something that you think's wrong, then go have it checked out.
I know, I have neighbors now, and it's like, they talk outside their house like at midnight, and I'm like,
Neighbors.
what is the noise going on?
Neighbors.
Yeah.
It's like odd to get used to.
Yeah.
But then you have to just adjust, cause
Hey,
if
my
you don't
neighbor's
own
horses
land,
can be loud in the middle of the night sometimes, and that bothers me.
Mine too.
So if it's
Okay.
5 o'clock in the morning, it's probably Justin out there running. So we're just gonna blame him.
Keep it
for
down.
No, I
Just
agree,
keep
cause
it
I thought about like with trails, some people get up early,
And they go and
just
run
go
them.
trail running, yeah.
And it's
How
been our
many-
experience that typically in the parks in those neighborhoods, if kids are in there, there's no good going on, and they call the police, but we also have people walking dogs you would never know.
Yeah.
And they do it all night long. I've
Yep.
seen them at 3 o'clock in the morning pop out of a trail, they're just walking their dog.
So I hate, you don't wanna put a time limit on that, because
I
that's
know, right.
sometimes what time people can do this.
And there may be somebody who wants to ride it with the headlamp on, I think they would be crazy, but they may, and if they're quiet.
And that's where I think my concern was, is I don't wanna make, you know, we're talking about not setting precedents, I don't wanna set a precedence that it's the city's intent to have anybody walking around at 5 o'clock in the morning get the police call.
Yeah, no, I hear you.
If there's something wrong, absolutely, is any situation you should call and get assistance, but, you know, just being
Well,
on
we
a
don't wanna be
trail.
in the position where the police are showing up because somebody went for a walk at 5 o'clock.
Yes,
It's just
that
not.
seems like a.
No, I
So you're,
agree.
you know,
No, I
Exactly.
agree, that's why I brought it up there, it was, I can relate to that, it's concerning, but it's like,
We
it's
are
an
really serious
adjustment
about
you
safety.
have to make to having
I
noise.
like the idea, the Trails Committee was talking a lot about trail etiquette, and I think maybe as we get more development, we put up signs of trail etiquette.
Yeah, that's good.
And I think there's something really important, not just to ride, but to ride properly, walk properly, get along with horses and bikes while you're doing these things, and they all should get along. So I think there's an ongoing, not a one-time only, but I think the Park Trails Committee is a good platform, and I think they're more than happy. They already do it with the high school biking team, they teach them etiquette right from the start. So I think this is a good start to train people.
So, what do you want us to do here? We could leave the switchbacks and implement the other options that might lower the amount of people that use the switchbacks. I know that the high school team likes to use them because it helps them with technical maneuvers.
So why do we want to lessen use?
No, what she's saying is leave it and then do more so that people can choose
So
to
there's
buy gas.
a few options, is what you're saying.
Yes.
So that's an option as well. We have a trail builder that's available this fall to do the work. I just want to know if you want to expend those extra funds.
I'll leave this up to you guys.
I want to
Want us to
look at our trail system as we've always looked at our trail system and identify the highest priorities. You know, and that is always determined by citywide needs, and I don't think we should deviate from that. I think that's the way we do things.
Okay, so what I'm gonna do is put this on hold until we come back with our whole planning process in the next few council meetings to have those discussions, and then we'll revisit it at a later date. Does that sound good? Yes.
Perfect.
Yes.
Okay. Parks Master Plan update, this one's fast, it shouldn't be an issue unless you're all gonna fight over who gets to serve on the steering committee, which is very exciting. We need one of you to serve as representative on the steering committee. It will be pretty limited meetings and then an public open house. So, I don't know if you wanna arm wrestle over it.
I can do it.
I can do it.
Okay.
You can have more than one too. We're happy to have as many as possible. So, we'll let you fight over it.
Thank you, Clint.
Okay.
So Clint's the victim? Thank you.
Hey,
My meetings are fun. Your meetings are fun.
all right. Next, we go from parks to electric vehicle charging stations. And I'm not quite sure how I was awarded this assignment, but here we are.
You're so good at this.
So, you all know that electric vehicles have continued to grow. They're still a very small percentage of the population, but we are seeing growth in the market. You've probably seen a few rambling around here. Some of our employees have them. Bryn
Yes.
is one of our model employees that's saving the planet. The rest of us are killing it slowly. So you had this in your packet. It kind of it explains the different types of charging stations that are available. Level 1 is pretty much what you would have in your home for charging overnight. Level 2 is probably the most prominent right now just because it's most cost effective. And the DC fast charge is the most expensive. It's mostly found along highway corridors and locations where people need a really fast charge in a short amount of time. So this is one of the websites. Alan, do you want to click on that plug share link underneath that logo? Where you can find out where to plug in your car. And Rocky Mountain Power and the state have done a really amazing job in implementing a plan so that people don't have concerns about their range when they're driving their car. People can go to this website, plug in their location, and it will tell them where they can go. The orange icons there indicate fast chargers. The green are level 1 or level 2 chargers. Is that gonna work, Alan? No. It needs a charge. But the other nice thing about this website is that when you identify a location, it tells you how much it might cost. People can check in and leave a review about the station, whether it was functioning, whether it wasn't functioning, what their experience was, whether there are shops or restaurants nearby, etc. And so it's a pretty handy deal. You can, nope.
Okay. You wouldn't run both of them at the same time.
Okay. That's okay, we don't need to see it. You all have this in your packet as well. You approved $36,000 for this project. And this is kind of where we're at. I did get some updated costs from ChargePoint. Now these costs are for a network station. So if you want to charge for use, you have to have a network station, which is more expensive than a non-network station. The non-network station is basically just a plug that people plug in and they use your utility for free. A networked location is gonna be one that we have the ability to set all sorts of parameters. We can set time limits, we can assign certain users to pay a certain rate. We can set rates, we can collect rates. We collect a lot of data and reporting from network chargers. They're not just a plug in the wall. So with the incentives from Rocky Mountain Power, we'll be under budget
So,
if we go through with level 2
question, so we're looking at a total here of 5 ports, is that correct?
Yes.
Why are we not doing 6? It's only 3,000 to do the third one as a double.
So I'll show you. But we might do 6. Justin and I were talking about it today. Let me get to the picture and then we'll come back. So you can't see this picture really well, but there's only 5 stalls
That makes sense.
in the location.
That answers that question.
So, but Justin and I texted I was thinking about it today when I was downtown at a conference, and one of the challenges that I talked about in the presentation was there's no ADA spaces available. There is an ADA space just across this parking lot that we could add another single port if we wanted to.
And it still keeps us under budget.
Yeah, we would still be under budget. So let's go back to this. So this fee is for network chargers. So if you want to charge today, the installation day, or if you want to charge 3 years in the future and use the same equipment, you would have to go with more expensive network chargers.
What's the backwards compatibility on, so what's to say this technology is not out of date in 2 years? We've spent $36,000 on it.
There's anything to guarantee that.
Crystal ball, yeah, it's really hard to.
Well, and I think that's my only real concern here is, are we gonna spend a bunch of money and then immediately, as technology often happens, changes and it's not sufficient enough to meet up with the next generation of cars. Now, I think that will take 10 to 15 years, but I just don't wanna, I wanna be careful. I think this is a good thing.
I think there's gotta be some uniformity
These are network
in the auto industry that's
So they give
doing
us the
that,
ability
that they're
to
not
charge
making, you know what I
So
mean?
we are planning on.
This is probably not something we
That's my
control.
question
I don't
for
just,
you
so-
today. So,
What other, so the state provides these, I'm certain Salt Lake City does.
Yes.
What other cities or municipalities provide that, have used taxpayer dollars to provide that service?
so Logan has one, Tree Mountain has one. There are some library services that have a few sprinkled around. Provo has a handful. Salt Lake City is by far the largest. And in the spring, they decided to completely waive the fees. And we'll get into that in a minute, kind of the comparison there. They were charging up to that point, but just found it wasn't worth.
My other question is, so my first question was one, like I said, how many municipalities are actually taking on this cost, even if it's just a one-time? Is that in fact our role, would be the obvious correlation between that. And then secondarily, realistically, how many of our residents are we even serving with this? Or how many residents do we anticipate are going to jump on this? So then I have to factor in, is the 32,000 worth both of those things? That 32,000 could be used elsewhere, and particularly if it is servicing such a small percentage of residents to make it simply not a good ROI on those particular tax dollars. Those are my two questions, just fundamentally getting back to the issue at hand.
So here's your annual ongoing costs. So you can see your networked are a lot more. The first year cost is included in this fee, so you wouldn't pay that on top of the $32,000, but you would accrue that in future years. So we would have to pay that $32.50 ongoing. Utility costs are an estimate that Salt Lake City provided to us, and the data and reporting cost is from ChargePoint. These are for networked chargers. And you can see it goes down for non-network chargers, where you cannot charge a fee, you lose data reporting capabilities, but you're saving the planet, so.
What's the expectation?
Right after my comment.
Wait till the conversion comes.
That's great.
If we do this, do we expect to make money off of the charging? No. So.
It's just principle.
Just an ongoing
It's
expense.
just a
So it's just expense
energy-wise,
to
pushed
serve.
by all government,
Who knows?
Yeah.
environment.
Because most of the residents, if they have electric vehicles, probably have a charging station in their home, and we don't live more than 4 miles from anywhere within our city. So to me, $36,000, and then plus another 3+ a year. I have a hard time saying that's worth.
Here's one thing I'd have you think about. The number one issue that's affecting businesses and this valley is air pollution, air quality. And we all agree there's nothing we can do about it. So I think we ought to at least send a message of what we're doing about it. I think
The number one contributor to air quality is idling as they're in traffic jams. I would much prefer they fix the transportation system so that we're not sitting on the freeway or on Bangor Highway for 30 minutes, which I was today, polluting the air because I had no place to go.
And like I said, there's nothing we can do about it.
This is minuscule.
I agree. So I wanted to make sure you heard what I said. There's nothing we can do about it. There's nothing we can do
It's a
about
little combative. I was back in my debate days. I'm sorry, I
it.
apologize.
So I'm agreeing with you.
Is that a per unit cost?
The bottom cost.
Yeah, the annual total.
So the totals are for all 5.
Okay, for all 5.
Yeah.
So
those are the per unit costs on this.
So I would be much more open to looking at doing one dual charger, you know, and seeing if it's used. I don't want to pay a bunch for 5 chargers when one, you know, we have 2 employees that are using it, and that's it.
So the only thing that I would have to say to that, and I considered that also, is that you have recurring infrastructure costs if you want to expand the network. So it's much cheaper to do it all at once with more stations than to continue to come back and add more. But that's definitely an option, and I can see this being expanded to our trailheads, to our parks. I mean, I can see it growing as the percentages of electric vehicles continue to grow. And we're just dipping our toe in to see how it works.
I'm not, sorry Sherry, I just can say I'm not familiar with how these work, so.
Your fire engines aren't electric?
No, they are not. They are as big a gas guzzlers as you'll find. Yes, so, Bren, I'll ask you since you have one, would this be something you pull in and you park your car there all day long? And it's plugged in all day long, or is this something that people are gonna come to do some services at City Hall and plug in for a short time?
You're right, because if you live here, you're not driving that far, but I can tell you my car has a range. I couldn't go to Park City and back in my car, but I can go to the outlet mall in Park City, and they have a charger, and I charge while I shop for 3 hours, and then I can drive home.
So guarantee shopping.
Isn't that what we're
Required
here?
purchases
But isn't that
is
what we're
something
doing here? I mean, I think that's, you're not maybe talking about residents, you could be talking about people coming to go skating from anywhere in the valley.
Well, but for me,
Or
that's when we would
coming
need
here
a
to
level,
restaurants.
we would
or-
need a level 3 charger. Because if we're only giving them 10 miles of range every hour, to me that seems, because that's what, can you go back to that slide on the different chargers? Because here it says 10 to 20 miles of range per hour of charge on one we're looking at, as opposed to 80% charge for your vehicle, 20 to 30.
But not, so having the same car as Brent, not all of them have a super port.
Yeah, they're not all the same.
If
They're not, yeah.
you have to pay a lot of money to get the super port, and if you don't have one, you can't use the $3. It's the big.
More people can use, the level 2 is.
In fact,
is
when
the
we
more
were
common.
buying one, it was hard to find one with a super
Yeah.
port. Probably 70% of them are not built with it, and you can't pull one on a. So it's really.
Can't go pick one up at Napa and throw it on there?
Yeah, you can wire it in.
I would say all the ones I've seen, 5 together is probably a lot. You usually see a couple of them, but it
And on
does make sense if
occasion,
it's cheaper to.
if you have that share port, you can actually reserve it. So if we're going downtown,
Yeah.
you can reserve a port just for, nobody else can even use it during that time. So you just pull in and put it in. But to use a number, or use the level 2, it takes several hours to get anywhere really.
And so if
It
we're not,
depends, yeah.
so, and that's my concern is, how, I mean, I can see, obviously an employee would use it because they're gonna be here for several hours, but how many people are coming here for 20 minutes and?
You would have to have a super port to make.
Or again, you're coming to go ice skating in the restaurant, you're gonna be here for 2 or 3 hours.
Maybe.
Yeah, and you would plug
My
in.
only thing is nobody's paying for my gas in my car.
Yeah.
If I come to the city, nobody says, pull up to the gas pump and fill it up for free.
Which gets back to, is that the role of the
That's my only issue is that it's like, if it's becoming a big issue around a business or something, maybe a business puts one in, they entice people to come there with those kind of cars.
They
But
do.
yeah, exactly, they do, and that would be why, because they're trying to entice customers, it just seems like
And that's what a lot of these locations are, especially
Yeah.
along the
Yeah.
I-15
Along
corridor.
Route 15.
So to me, it's like to use taxpayer money to do it at City Hall and just say, well, we are gonna pay for the power for electric cars, but we're not gonna pay for the gas. That would be my issue with it.
I would just rather use the money elsewhere, just something that doesn't feel like it's.
I think it's something that's, as we continue to develop this or the commercial stuff in here, I think it's something that, to Brent's point, that we probably may need to look at there.
Businesses are gonna wanna make.
I don't think,
Yeah.
I don't
that's
think
appropriate.
for City Hall, we're there yet,
I don't think so either.
I see.
but I love the plan.
Is the money we have from Rocky Mountain Power,
Yeah, how much of this is our actual cost?
31,000.
is that money gonna go away? If
We don't, who knows, crystal
Okay.
ball.
How much is Rocky Mountain Power manage?
Right, the 75% of equipment cost.
Total incentive is $9,500.
Okay.
So we're still left with the 35.
Plus ongoing costs.
Yeah, the 3,500.
That's another,
ongoing cost
yeah.
annually, yeah.
And if it's gonna cost us money every year,
I don't think we're there.
make
I think, I believe in it, I just don't think we're.
according to
Thank you, Wendy. All right. Item 3.8, discussion of a potential interlocal cooperative agreement with Salt Lake County regarding planning services for pending annexation.
Okay, so we are working on a potential development project in this annexation area that the council is currently studying. And in order to facilitate that development, we're trying to see if there's an ability to begin construction prior to the completion of the annexation. So we've been meeting with the county. In fact, Gordon, myself, and Bryn yesterday met with their development services, their planning director, their planning staff. And we've been negotiating what this interlocal agreement might look like in order to facilitate that. Right now, the county is saying that in order to meet our project deadline, they're willing to let us do all of the technical reviews on the project. So the building permit, our transportation reviews, our engineering review. So that part is looking fairly straightforward. If there are any additional costs associated by an expedited review process, they've asked that we would offset that cost. So any additional costs above and beyond what they would typically do in responding to a development request. And right now, we're looking at a potential conditional use process in the county prior to the annexation. There's also a possibility that a preliminary subdivision plat might be filed, but we're still not sure on that. We're looking for some further direction from the county. At first, I think that we were anticipating this interlocal agreement would be a little more complex, but it looks like the county is cooperating with us, and it should be fairly straightforward as far as understanding that certain fees would be covered by the city, those additional costs that the county may bear, and then they're willing to essentially allow us to issue the building permit, do the inspections, because by the time that the building comes up out of the ground, it will likely be in our city. So we are working on this draft. John has been pulled into this process, of course, of preparing the interlocal agreement. We have to share it with the county because they also need to approve it. Their council needs to approve it. And I'm thinking, is it in 2 weeks we're hoping to present a draft to the council?
Yeah, the problem is we each have,
One meeting?
we really have only next city council meeting to, and then,
To work with the individual schedules of
Right.
council
to meet
meetings,
all the
yeah.
schedules, because
Right.
there's not a lot of meetings between now and the end of the year.
End of the year.
So we may be coming at you a little quickly, but we'll try to get it to you early to look at. But those are the key points, is that,
Do you have any concerns over aspects of the planning process that, from either side at this point, that could make this difficult moving forward?
maybe, we'll talk a little bit more in detail later, but right now, the staff has been extremely cooperative and helpful, and at this point, we see a path forward.
You have every sense they're treating us fairly.
Absolutely.
So we're willing to, do the building permit through our side. It has to be entirely in the county, because it's physically in the county.
Their, their largest concern, I think, is they wanna make sure we're coordinating this information with our, neighboring cities, as well as soliciting, feedback from our own residents as we move forward through the process.
Sounds good.
Okay, thank you, Mike, appreciate that. Discussion of annexation agreement with Kennecott, Utah Copper.
So today we met with Kennecott again, and we went through the details of what we think are going to the development agreement, and we'll share a little bit more of that a little bit later because there's property acquisition involved in that, but they're still eager to go forward with it, and January 1st, our city grows by 267 acres. Can't tell you more than that just now.
Okay. Well, thank you. All right, discussion on Salt Lake Community College use of Herriman Community Center.
So we talked a little bit about this last council meeting. We brought it to your attention that we've been having some discussion with Salt Lake Community College as far as the use of the old building. That building has been okayed for surplus, and we're in the process of putting together the RFP to go out to a broker. It kind of concerns Malin, the director at Salt Lake Community College. In discussions with him, they've had a huge, overwhelming response towards classes over there, a lot more than what they had even initially anticipated. They did very little advertising, about 2 weeks worth, and they had over 160 initial applications for classes. He kind of compared that to some of their other annexes, and he said that that was a lot greater than what any of those had started. They've done some renovations over there, invested quite a bit of stuff inside the building, and they're saying that they're having such overwhelming response that they're actually looking at utilizing the basement also. He actually has been asking me about the possibility of moving some walls or doing some things at their expense to be able to open some areas up for some larger classes. In discussion with them, they're kind of concerned that as things go on and the timeline that it would take to be able to get the buildings moving out here, what happens if the building sells? And so, in discussion with Brett and Gordon, we kind of been trying to come up with a solution on that. One of the solutions that was suggested was, what if they took over all of the operating and maintenance costs of the building, to where it basically removed any of that financial burden from the city. And so that was kind of the proposal that they would like us to bring to you. Malin mentioned that he knows that he's at the mercy of the city, and is very, very grateful at the generosity that we've had so far to give them a place to be able to have classes out here. He did also mention that October 5th, next week, they have a presentation in front of their building, the Board of Builders, which is where they try to get the funding to be able to start coming out of the ground over here.
And they're gonna ask for an appropriation during the session.
Correct.
So.
Even with that, it takes some time, of course.
But I do think the numbers that they're racking up will help them in their endeavor to get money.
Yes,
I mean, if you can see that the need is there. So if we could eliminate any cost that we're putting out for that building, and then I'm fine not even charging a lease rate, but if we're fine eliminating any out costs, then I'm completely fine with making that be the temporary location. Because we're not putting anything out. In fact, they're helping us.
We'd love to sell the building and use that money elsewhere in the city, that'd be beneficial. But you're spot on with your assessment. By them using that building and the enrollment keeps on going higher and higher, they're needing more space. They'll take care of that burden that we've already budgeted for, we maintain that building. We've already been sick, we start saving money. But you're absolutely spot on with your assessment about the Board of Regents and the Building Authority. If they show numbers of enrollment there, it will help them get more points in their grading process to move forward to get it up the scale to where we actually get it out of the ground. It still might take, we might not get it this year, but that is a healthy process for our residents to be able to have college right there.
And we've already agreed that that building is in a challenging location. But for quite a specialized business, it doesn't have the visibility, it doesn't have the access. This is I think a great use for this that ultimately benefits the city better than anything else we could possibly do with it at this point. I mean, anything that we get in there, were we to sell it, is going to be of a service nature, which isn't going to generate any sales tax. That's not a building that is a commercial-ish type building. And so again, I think this is the best and highest use of that, particularly if we're able to eliminate the operational costs.
Yeah, I think it's important to eliminate them, because it seems like we're using taxpayer money to pay the operation costs, and then plus taxpayers are paying into other educational things, so we need to have them take over.
Yeah.
So it's only getting hit one time.
That was our assessment as
Yep.
well.
I would be supportive.
Well, I've already talked about this with Brett, and I'm the same way. I'm supportive. I think this, as long as they're taking on all the costs, and we, they're basically maintaining a building, a property for us,
And adding value to
and
it,
adding
it sounds
value
like.
to it.
So.
Why would we not want to provide this service to our community, especially when there was such a push from the community to make sure this building was used for a community purpose? And I think that falls well within community purpose. So for me, the only question I have is, what's the time length? Are we gonna put a sunset on this, or are we gonna review it after a certain amount of time? Or that would be my only question. Not to say that I'm not happy to do several years out, to make it clear that we want them to invest in us as much as we're willing to invest in
I
them.
would propose, Mayor, I would not want to put a drop deadline on it, because we don't know what's gonna happen with installation. And I do believe that if we just say let's say spring, you're out.
No.
No, but an
Or next
annual
year,
review
you're
or
No, what I'm
something
saying
like
is,
that.
we review it in 3 years so that we can.
Well, I think we'll
yeah.
bring it back and have it reviewed every year.
Yeah, I think so.
So just as long as that's part of the agreement that we.
So we know what's happening with their campus site here in Herriman, if that's moving forward. But also, hands down, the comment's been made, that I'm aware of, that's been made on Facebook about people having this close opportunity to go back to college.
I think it's fantastic.
Outstanding.
Yeah,
Just to clarify, would that also include obviously the operational cost of the building, but what about the general maintenance cost of the building, exterior roof, AC units, those types of things? Would that all fall to them as well?
So in discussing that with Malin, they have their own in-house crews. They'll come in and they'll do all the cleaning, the maintenance, the upkeep of the building, and if any of the AC units go down, he said they would take care of the repairs on those. The roof, we had not discussed. Right now, the roof's in pretty good shape. I still would imagine we got another 8 to 10 years worth of life cycle in that roof. Those are definitely concerns that we can bring up. I discussed, originally he was asking what would the options be if the city continued to mow the grass over there, and as far as snow plowing. I talked to Brett about that. We brought up, well, we understand why he's saying that is it's such a small piece of grass, it's hard for him to get a crew to transport all the way across the valley. But with that, there's other ways of solving that. What if we continue to leave it on the contract that we have under our mowing contract right now, and we figure out the square footage and they just cover that cost? So he's open to any of those suggestions.
I think if the idea is to have them foot the bill for the expense of the building, then the scenario you just painted really has to be the scenario we go with, that they pay for the maintenance, both in and outside the building, which would include, the landscaping and the snow maintenance, but we're giving them the true cost of it.
Yes.
I think the separation is important. What we're saying is we're happy to have you be the new tenant, provided you're paying for the expense. And I think if we allow any outgoing expense, even if it's nominal, for landscaping, then we get back to Sherry's argument of taxpayer dollars, again, that shouldn't be used that way. I think the package deal is what we do that way.
The other concern that we had on it was working out an agreement with them to verify that since they're bringing people into the building, if there was ever an accident or anything like that, it would be their insurance and their liability.
Yeah, I think we're all supportive of that.
Okay, keep moving forward then.
Yeah, thank you. Good.
Thanks.
It's exciting.
Direction.
It's good.
It's exciting.
Good.
I like the numbers.
All right, on to our city manager updates. We got.
Actually, it's been short and sweet. Offline, I'd like to have a conversation with you, update on some issues, but also just like Alan did, he got the sales tax results for the month, and we're climbing still. It's weird.
We're up 21% for the our September was 27% above last September. The most encouraging thing was our point of sale within the city, was higher than any month we've ever had except last Christmas.
Really?
We're seeing more of the local point of sale.
What's interesting, we won't see a lot of decline in local point of sale, I don't think, from Mountain Village, because there's not, I guess Harmon's, it will be interesting to see what we pull from grocers.
Didn't affect it this month apparently.
Yeah, well, they just barely opened.
The stuff we got today is for July sales. They run 2 months behind.
Okay.
So I would be really, I'm always going to be interested to see where the leakage, where we start dropping, that we can sort of just common sense attribute to Mountain View.
I just really had anxiety when it was on Smith's Marketplace going over 118. I thought that would drop. It didn't hardly even affect us.
This one seems more of a direct competitor to me, though.
Yeah, but I knew all of the residents came over. They did.
I never go to Smith's in the
And all
parking
those
lot's
are
not full.
home there now.
It's always
Even
busy.
with Harmon's, it's always full.
Yep, I agree.
I didn't notice it dropping, so.
That's
I
good
don't do
news
their
today.
sales totals,
Yeah,
but
that's good.
yeah, that's good.
Is that it?
It's loyal shoppers, shop Herriman,
That's important.
yeah, for sure.
That's all I have, man.
Okay, well, with that,
Wow.
are we gonna need more than 15 minutes for a closed meeting? Okay, come on. All right, so with that,
More
I
than 15 minutes.
will accept a motion to,
Motion to adjourn the city council work meeting.
Second.
all in favor?
Aye.
We are so adjourned.
Still your book.
Yeah, man.
Yeah, I was wondering about what that meant. I was like, where did my Bible, what is my thinking?
You're working here. Oh.
Run away with stuff, Wendy.
Don't mind the shopping list she made in there.
Well, you know,
Facebook
I want one of those
So
really
you
bad.
Hey, Cliff.
I didn't tell you to understand that when I was
It's
at that.
proprietary
This is an
system.
acquisition to share with the legislators. Still needs closed meetings.
I'm kind of a fan of not putting